Welcome to The Breakdown with Dr. Earl, a mental health podcast. This is Dr. Earl Turner, a licensed psychologist and psychology professor in Los Angeles. Just a few disclaimers. The Breakdown podcast is not intended to replace working with a licensed mental health professional. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of The Breakdown with Dr. Earl. Today we're talking about Black boys and emotional intelligence, and I'm excited to have Mr. Avery Rosser join us to talk about this particular topic. So Avery is a licensed professional counselor in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and he's also the founder of We Climb Counseling and Consulting. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I've been following, you've been doing a lot of amazing work in the Atlanta area, and I've been following you on social media. And I think one of the posts that you had posted was about mentoring and Black boys, and you had mentioned experience where you were like, I think in a Chick-fil-A, and so I was like, oh, this is a really interesting topic, and I think, something that comes up a lot around like mentoring and Black boys, and so I wanted to like extend that conversation to talk more about just sort of emotional intelligence and how to raise Black boys to sort of be comfortable with sort of the range of emotions. And so I'm excited to sort of talk a little bit more with you about that. But before we sort of dive into that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell the audience a little bit about your background and your area of expertise.
Awesome. Again, thank you for having me. Again, I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Georgia. I previously served as a school counselor at the elementary level in Muskogee County at Brewer Elementary. In conjunction to that, I've served as an intake coordinator and case manager on the Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Unit with the Bradley Center. Currently, I hold the title of Crisis Responder with the Department of Veterans Affairs, Veterans and Military Crisis Line. And I'm the owner and clinical director of We Climb Counseling and Consulting.
I wanted to sort of talk with you a little bit about sort of what are some of the current issues that you feel are really impacting the mental health of youth specifically at this current time.
COVID-19 is definitely impacting everyone's mental wellness as it relates to just on different levels, different factors, whether it's from an economic standpoint, from a health standpoint, social isolation. People aren't aware of what to do with their emotions, what to do with their time. My mom used to have this saying, idle mind is the devil's playground. And in moments of isolation, we tend to get stuck within our thoughts, with our thoughts. And oftentimes, in most cases, these thoughts aren't always pleasant thoughts. So we tend to just focus a lot on those thoughts in times of isolation. So as it relates to COVID-19, mental health is really something that we're starting to see truly impacting us, and we're becoming more aware of it. I'm starting to see more people express what they're experiencing through COVID-19. And I'm happy that people are more open and more receptive to having the conversation, having the dialogue. Of course, I'm not happy as far as kind of how it's impacting everybody, but it's giving everybody a way of talking about it, a way of expressing themselves. Even if they don't even understand what's going on with them, they're asking the question. So that's been a very unique thing as it relates to COVID-19 and how it's been impacting our mental health. There are other factors as it relates to things that are relating to our impacting our mental well-being as well. One thing that I see is, again, I deal with a lot of child and adolescents. And oftentimes my clientele encompasses a lot of Black boys, single mothers and Black boys. And they're generally coming to me, they're looking for a Black male therapist, someone that can potentially relate to their child or relate to their son. And oftentimes they may come in with a pre-existing diagnosis, whether it's ADHD or the mother is speculating that it could be ADHD. And just not knowing about the particular disorder has impacted or was impacting that child's ability to function on a quote unquote normal scale. So just not really knowing about mental health has truly impacted our ability to get the help that we're needing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, I talked about this on a recent episode, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we were talking about ADHD. And one of the things that came up was that for parents in general, that oftentimes sort of just that uncertainty about sort of what ADHD specifically looks like and how it might impact the child in terms of their overall functioning, like peer relationships. I think we don't oftentimes think about that. We always think about either the overactivity or hyperactivity, but we don't think about how it might impact like their ability to be successful in school. And so I think having those conversations is really helpful when you can connect with the mental health professional that can really sort of talk about what are the unique challenges that, their individual child might face just based upon sort of their own characteristics of the disorder. One thing sort of segue into sort of talk about this idea about why mothers specifically, or just parents in general, are looking for other male therapists or counselors to work with their Black boys, is this idea around sort of masculinity norms. And I know that these conversations have been occurring more frequently in the last like 2 years in terms of like what masculinity is toxic and how much should we go in terms of teaching boys to be more emotionally expressive, and how does that translate over into adulthood. What types of conversations or experiences have you had with parents around just sort of masculinity and dealing with like the mental health or emotional expression component? And how do you sort of deal with like talking with parents about teaching boys to like express a range of emotions, as opposed to us always being, I think it's comfortable for us to be able to talk about expressing anger and what that looks like, and dealing with sort of anger management, but we don't really talk about some of our other feelings and emotions, particularly from the lens of like what's considered to be masculine or tough. So how do you deal with that in terms of the work that you've done with boys and with families?
I'll start with this. I have an 11-year-old son, and he and I had a conversation about toxic masculinity and about self-expression 2 nights ago while sitting in the garage. And I would ask him a question, say, "Hey, son, how you doing? Has there been anything that bothered you? Is there anything that's bothering you?" And being able to just let him know, like, listen, I understand that as a boy, that there's a certain persona that we like to try to portray. We like to try to portray being tough. Toughness is something that, from a male perspective, is something that we have to exhort in a sense. And just being able to let him know, listen, you being able to express yourself doesn't make you weak. So let's go ahead and do away with this whole notion that self-expression, let me know, or letting us know, or let anyone know that, hey, something is bothering you is a sign of weakness. Actually, that's the most courageous thing that you can do, is being able to express yourself, express how you're feeling in an open and healthy way. And being able to teach him the different ways to be able to express himself. Hey, there's positive coping skills, there's negative coping skills. And I have this same conversation with my parents that come through my office. And I always ask them, okay, do you think your son feels safe expressing himself in the household? And oftentimes, that they always look at me with these big eyes and like, what do you mean? I said, well, when they say that I'm hurting, or when they say something is bothering me, are they often met with opposition when say, well, what do you mean toughen up? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes like, well, yeah, I have to, because I'm doing this by myself. I have to be both mom and dad. So I have to make sure that he's tough so that when he goes out into the world, he is prepared. And I say, I understand that completely, because I grew up the same way. However, it is important to also teach your son that it's okay not to be okay. It is okay to say, Mom, I'm dealing with something. I am dealing with these emotions, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, and I don't necessarily know what to do with it. And being able to have a healthy dialogue with them and say, listen, let's sit down and just talk about what it is that you're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And through that approach, parents are starting to see that their kids are more receptive to just engaging with them on just a normal level. Being able to, I know my son now, he's more comfortable with just having a conversation with his parents, because we make it safe for him to have that conversation. So in my practice, I'm working with parents on learning how to make it safe and acceptable for their sons to have a conversation about what they are experiencing,
Hmm.
about their hurt, about their pain, and teaching them different ways to help them cope with the things that they're experiencing. Oftentimes, as parents, we weren't taught how to cope. So it's difficult for parents to teach their kids and to teach their son how to cope, especially for women. It's difficult for them to teach their son how to cope because they're a man. So for them, they're not dealing with a lot of the things, a lot of the unique challenges that men deal with. So to teach them ways to cope has been challenging for them. So one thing that I do is I sit them down and we talk about, hey, let's deconstruct toxic masculinity. Let's figure out what it is come from, what it is idea of being tough, and let's redefine toughness together from a family standpoint. Let's figure out a way to redefine toughness. All right. So being able to have that dialogue with them and to make a challenge to them to say, hey, together we're going to come up with our own definition of masculinity and what that looks like. Not, we don't care about what society say it looks like because that's what we base it off of.
Yeah.
We base it off of what society tells us masculinity is, especially for a Black man. You know, we have this a perspective of masculinity to where we have to show people that we're tough because of the things that we've gone through, right? From slavery to Jim Crow to the things that we're experiencing now. The man has to be tough, right? As a Black man, you have to be tough. You're going to experience things whether it's whether you're being stopped by a policeman or whatever the case may be from discriminatory practice. You have to exert some sort of toughness to be able to deal with the way of the world. But we're not often taught how to process the pain and the hurt that we may be experiencing as a result of it. So
Yeah.
being able to teach them to say, hey, let's dispel a lot of these false narratives about what it truly means to be tough. All right. So being able to tackle it from that standpoint has been able to help my clients and help my son and my family be able to redefine masculinity.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I agree with everything that you said. And I think when it comes to this idea about sort of emotional intelligence, what I've always told parents and people when I talk about conversations about sort of masculinity and the mental health aspect and the sort of communication stuff and men being open to go to therapy is that oftentimes from a young age, we're not taught that it's okay to be emotional or